Welcome in to our Week 7 NFL DFS first look video and lineup builder. I'm your host, Ben Hostler, and this video is once again sponsored by Rolling Insights. Make sure you guys head over to rollinginsights.com. Sign up for SportWise. It's free. Tons of fun and cool data spaces that you can get in there, play around with, all sorts of stuff you can do. We show it off on the live stream sometimes. We show it off on the content. There are truly tons of stuff that you can do over in SportWise. And if you're building a product or you're interested at all in getting access to our APIs, head over to the website there as well. Check out our data feeds product. We are coming off a interesting week 6 slate. A third of the season is already gone. We are past the 1/3 mark of the season, heading into week 7 here. I had my worst week DFS wise in a while in week 6. A little bit short on time. Again, I have some stuff going on in the background, so a little bit later in the week for this video. Apologies for that. But it was not a good week for me in week 6. Made the wrong 2v2 choice on DraftKings. Actually, there was a couple combos I was debating, and I chose wrong. Now, I chose wrong in terms of the results, but I'm still comfortable with the choice I made at the end of the day because it was a very, very chalky week. And that's what happens when we have these 10-game slates. We're getting into the thick of the season now, and not as many people are playing DFS cash games. And anyone that is paying attention. So, we're going to get a lot of these big train lineups the rest of the season. It's harder to play heavy cash games as we progress through the season. I think a lot of people were debating a couple 2v2s last week. There was a 3v3 I actually looked at that I didn't end up taking, but I picked Ladd McConkey over. It was like Ladd McConkey, Hunter Long versus Chris Olave and Michael Mayer. In hindsight, Michael Mayer is definitely better than a $3,100 tight end, especially with Brock Bowers out. But I felt really, really strong about Ladd over Olave. And, it just didn't work out, but it was within points. I still won some money back, but didn't get a full cash. FanDuel also, I was debating dropping off of Puka on FanDuel down to JSN, and, that decision burned me there. But look, we are still in a good spot for the season long. 4-2 over on DraftKings and 5-1 on FanDuel. Had one good tournament team on DraftKings that I actually made on stream with Matt Sunday morning. It was a Dak Prescott double stack. Had George Pickens in there, had DK Metcalf in there, and Josh Jacobs, who had a really good game in the afternoon games as well. But with that being said, let's dive into this Week 7 NFL DFS slate. It is another just 10-game slate. So we've got bye weeks. We've got Thursday Night Football, Monday Night Football, a London game. So only 10 games on the main slate once again. But I will say the totals on this slate look a little bit better than the last couple weeks. So we have a 45.5 in the Raiders-Chiefs game. We've got a 46.5 in the Saints and Bears game. We have a 48.5 in the Colts and Chargers. And then look out. I mean, it's looking like 2018, 2019 right here. Commanders, Cowboys, 54.5 point total. That is a monster total for the current stages of the NFL. And then, there's some other, 44s out there, 43s. So kind of a standard slate to what we've been accustomed to, but we do get that big 54.5 point total. And that is certainly going to affect ownership at a higher level on the slate. Let's get into the quarterback position. At the top, Patrick Mahomes, 7K, Jaden Daniels, 6,900, Jalen Hurts, 67, Dak Prescott, 65, Justin Herbert, 64, Drake May, Jordan Love, Daniel Jones, all rounding us out. So tons of options over 6K on this slate. We do have the presence of some dual threat quarterbacks, that being Jaden Daniels, that being Jalen Hurts, and to a lesser extent, Drake May. But we do have some guys that can run at the top here. And then you also have Patrick Mahomes, who is back kind of playing at his Mahomesian level to when we were seeing him win these MVP awards. He has been fantastic this season, and he's getting Rashee Rice back this week, who is going to be extremely chalky, spoiler alert, at the wide receiver position. So, some decisions to be made at the top here. Where I think most people will be going in their cash games is going to be either Caleb Williams at 5,800 at home against the Saints in that 48.5 total, or getting up to Jaden Daniels at 6,900 in a dome against the Dallas Cowboys with that 54.5 point total. He's healthier, coming off his highest DraftKings point total for the entire season on Monday night against the Bears. And we saw him with his, 10 carries for 52 yards. Did lose 2 fumbles, but, that kind of happens. A little bit noisy, but, I feel pretty confident about Jane Daniels up there at 6,900 as well. So I think that's where the majority of users will be looking for their cash game formats. If you want to get to Mahomes, you can do that as well. But for cash, I'd probably feel better about saving 100 and just playing Daniels with the threat of the rushing floor. But although Patrick Mahomes has had a little bit more of a rushing floor than we're accustomed to because of how bad the Chiefs' run game has been, we have a 57-yard game, a 66, a 60, a 32. He's got 4 rushing touchdowns. They have been using Patrick Mahomes heavily in the red zone as a runner. And I do think that's sticky. I would look for the Chiefs to potentially acquire a running back at the trade deadline. They're one of the few teams that can afford to make a luxury move like that. So, Breece Hall, I could see making his way potentially to Arrowhead. But for right now, they're comfortable using Patrick Mahomes as a runner. And I think that's a different wrinkle than what we've seen in the past from him. So that definitely, increases the ceiling for what is Patrick Mahomes as well. So those are kind of the 3 guys I would be considering. I'm going to wait to plug in a quarterback on our first look lineup here until we fill out some of our other positions, and then we'll see what kind of money we're working with the rest of the way here. For tournaments, Daniel Jones and Justin Herbert are going to be of interest in that high total game there. Dak Prescott on the opposite side of the Washington-Dallas game looks like a really strong play to me. Dak Prescott has been, insane this season, in my opinion. Firmly should be in the MVP race. The Cowboys just aren't very good, but he's playing at an MVP level. And Washington's secondary is one that I think you can take advantage of, especially with big plays down the field. So Dak Prescott looks like a really strong play as well. You have an interesting narrative in the New England-Tennessee game with Mike Vrabel returning back to Tennessee. Jordan Love's been a great passer this year. The volume would just be a concern there. And then what do we do with some of these bad games? I mean, Jets-Carolina is a close spread. Browns and Dolphins is a close spread. Create some interesting talking points. You also have Jackson Dart there. Denver's defense has been good, but not quite the level I would say we expected. And Jackson Dart has been great from a fantasy perspective. 19, 18, and 24 DraftKings points in his 2 starts. Still just 5,200. So it looks like a pretty good play there. Tons of interesting options at the quarterback position. Switching over to running back, we once again have no Christian McCaffrey on this slate. So, that kind of opens things up a little bit. I talked last week and the week prior about, Jonathan Taylor becoming kind of a mini version of Christian McCaffrey, but still, I don't feel pressured to play Jonathan Taylor quite like I do Christian McCaffrey. So at the top in terms of pricing, Taylor, Achane, Jacobs, Barkley, Genty, those are your guys above 7K. And then you have Rico Dowdle all the way up there at 68 as well. Javonte Williams at 67. I could see some value options popping this week at the running back position on some bad teams. And I just mentioned it. What do we do with the Carolina Jets game? What do we do with the Cleveland-Miami game? I could see both Quinshon Judkins and Breece Hall becoming pretty high-owned options. So Breece Hall 6,300 at home against the Panthers. They have no Garrett Wilson. So the one thing about Breece Hall is if he's not finding success as a runner, he does have that pretty strong receiving floor at times. And that should only increase with Garrett Wilson being off the field. So I feel fine with the Breece Hall chalk here home against the Panthers. A lot of people will talk about how the Panthers defense has actually been pretty good this year. They've been better against the run. I don't really know if I believe that. They typically play pretty slow games. I don't think this game is going to be fun. I think this is going to be a slow game. For cash games, I'll definitely take the volume that I expect to see from Breece Hall. But from a tournament perspective, I don't think I'm really interested in this game, just given the pace that I think it will play at. But with no Garrett Wilson, I think Breece Hall is fine. You then have Quinshon Judkins at 6K. Now, what's interesting about this is we saw this really, really good workload from him immediately upon returning. He missed the entire summer. He comes back, gets 10 carries, and then we saw a steady trend up, 18, 21, 23. Really, really strong workload for Quinshon Judkins. They were centering their offense around him. Then they go on the road to Pittsburgh, and he only gets 12 carries for 36 yards. They were inside the 5-yard line at one point. He did not get a carry on a certain drive. So, there's kind of some interesting things at play with Quinshon Judkins. Now, you can run all over the Miami Dolphins defense. It is stylistically a very, very good matchup for him. But will the Browns give him the ball? I think that is a reasonable question. I personally think the Browns are openly tanking right now for draft picks. I openly think that. It's only week 7, and I think the Browns are trying to lose football games. But, for cash games, I think he's fine. I would probably be a little wary of 40% owned Quinshon Judkins in tournaments. But for cash games, I'm comfortable plugging him and Breece Hall in as a running back pair. Other options you have there, I think Achane looks really good, against the Browns defense. I could see him get going. Jacobs, obviously. Javonte Williams is coming off a bad game last week, but in that high total game, I still think he's fine. The volume was still there for Javonte, not really worried about him as it currently stands. You also have Bill Krosky-Merritt there at 6,100, priced right alongside Breece Hall and Quinshon Judkins. What do people do with him? It's a very, very good matchup. You can certainly run on Dallas. The workload has been great for Bill Krosky-Merritt. He did have a fumble. He actually had 2 fumbles, in that game, one of which was credited to Jane Daniels. It wasn't his fault. And then one was his fault. But he was involved in 2 fumbles is what I'm saying. But the workload's been really good. The problem with Bill Krosky-Merritt is he's probably going to be pretty touchdown dependent because he just does not have that receiving floor. So if he's not scoring touchdowns, you're victim to these 7 and 8 point DraftKings point games. Whereas like Breece Hall, I don't think that's the case. Like against the Jets, he can go, or against the Cowboys, he can go score 21.5 without a touchdown. He can go score 16 against the Dolphins without a touchdown. Much higher floor there for Breece Hall. So that's why I'm more inclined to put him in. But I do think Bill Krosky-Merritt is going to get some ownership there. DeAndre Swift at 5,700 looks pretty interesting. He's down here priced alongside the Chargers guys. Like Kamani Vidal had a great game for the Chargers last week. I was wrong about that. I thought that Boomer Jim Harbaugh would run his boy Hassan Haskins. That was not the case. And that's a good decision because Kamani Vidal is a better football player than Hassan Haskins. He got the ball as well. 75% of the running back touches, scored a touchdown, 25 DraftKings points. So he's looking pretty good at 5,500 alongside DeAndre Swift, who I think is a strong play there. I think the Bears could really, really get cooking against the New Orleans Saints defense at, Saints on the road. I think the Bears could be in for a big offensive performance. So some interesting other running back options there. Moving on to receiver. It's probably going to be a 3 running back week again, but we'll kind of see what we get into. No Puka Nacua on the slate. Obviously, he'd be hurt anyways. We don't know if CeeDee Lamb's going to play. I'm going to assume right now that he's not playing, but we don't know for sure. Garrett Wilson will probably not be playing in this game. So Justin Jefferson, George Pickens, Rome Odunze. Those are our 3 highest priced receivers on the slate. You have Tedero McMillan there as well, Jalen Waddle, Xavier Worthy, Deebo Samuel, Ladd McConkey, Quentin Johnston. Interesting. I don't know. If you ask someone in July, like if we got to week 7 of the season and the 3 highest priced receivers were Justin Jefferson, George Pickens, and Rome Odunze, I don't know if people would believe you necessarily. But the thing that sticks out the most at receiver is DraftKings leaving Rashee Rice at $5,600 against the Raiders. He is going to be the first player in your cash game lineup this week. So you can just go ahead and plug him in. I am seeing, a big 30% ownership tag on him. And I think that will only increase as the week goes on, to be honest with you. Assuming Deebo Samuel plays $6,200 against the Dallas Cowboys, I think that's a pretty good play as well. And I think Waddle, honestly, Browns played pretty man heavy on the back end in their secondary. We saw DK Metcalf have a big game against them last week. He's a bigger guy. Browns have smaller corners, so I don't necessarily think it's a 1-for-1 comparison comparing it to Waddle. But I also think Jalen Waddle is capable of beating man coverage and getting open, getting separation, and having a good game. What happens with the Browns pass rush versus the Miami O-line is a talking point. But one thing is certain, Mike McDaniel has absolutely owned these Jim Schwartz defenses. I think he has faced them 2 times in the last few years, and they have just absolutely dominated them. I want to see if I can pull up the previous games for the Browns. Like I know the Browns played them last year. Let's see. So if we go to 2024, yeah. So it was end of the season, so it was just 20-3. Miami won 20-3 against the Browns late last season. And then if we go back to 2023, Miami, maybe I guess it was 2022. Yeah, Miami put up 39 points on this defense in a 39-17 win. So I guess that's a little bit differently than I thought. I thought it was the last 2 years, but still, I think Jalen Waddle is pretty capable as a man coverage beater. You have Chris Olave down here again, 5,400 looks like a pretty good price tag, although it's not home. I worry about Chris Olave like when they're not playing these home games because I worry about the Saints' potential to stay in and involved in these games. That would be my concern there. Pretty crazy to see Marv Harrison Jr. down at 5,300, but that price tag is certainly warranted. I think like we're waiting on a lot of injury stuff here, particularly Jacoby Myers, because typically you can beat the Chiefs in the slot. Jack Beck has seen a huge increase in his kind of routes run and participation the last few weeks, and he's all the way down at min price. So if we got a situation where Jacoby Myers does not play, and it kind of sounds like Jacoby Myers is going to be traded, so I do think there's like a decent chance Jacoby Myers misses this game. That would interest me in like Trey Tucker and Jack Beck, like some of these value Raiders options. I'm not going to put those guys in the lineup right now, but just a talking point. Since I'm doing this a little bit later in the week, we can think through those things. If there's a situation where Jacoby Myers gets ruled out, you could sell me on some of those cheaper Raiders guys. With the DJ Moore question mark, we also have Mr. Luther Burden down here as well, priced I think at like 4,300. So we saw him run more routes than we have seen coming out of the bye week. He looks good. He's clearly better than Olamide Zaccheaus. So at some point, Luther Burden is going to, take over and kind of Wally Pip Mr. Zaccheaus there. I like Luther Burden a lot at 4,300. I'm going to plug him in to the first look lineup. I hit a nice prop. His receiving line on Monday was just 18.5 yards, and he finishes with over 60. So that was a pretty good look. Talked about that on the live stream on Monday. So lots of value here. I mean, I think we just go ahead and plug in Debo for now, but there's other cheap guys that we can consider, Olave, whatever happens with kind of the Raiders situation. And honestly, I like Jalen Waddle at 63. If you want to go Stephon Diggs at 56 too, like there's plenty of value options. AJ Brown down at 5,800. I mean, like that has to be mentioned, honestly. That's not a bad price tag. I know he's been terrible, but I don't know. It's worth mentioning. Moving on to the tight end position. It's been a weird situation at tight end this year, I feel like. There's been a couple weeks where we had tons of salary and we were able to spend up. There's been a couple weeks where we were looking to punt. Typically, I like to punt, but I think assuming Brock Bowers is out, which it sounds like he will be, I think we just go right back to Michael Mayer. He was chalk last week. He got in the end zone. 3,500 is cheap enough, and it's important to remember Michael Mayer was selected very high in the NFL draft. He was the best tight end in college football at one point. This guy does have potential when he gets an opportunity. So Michael Mayer, 3,500 going in the first look lineup. As far as defense goes, we'll just plug in our standard cheap one. You have there's like Cardinals down here, Titans, Jets, Vikings. We'll just put the Vikings in. That's 26. I think that's fine. Put the Vikings in for now. All right. So what do we do at quarterback? What do we do in the flex? That's a decision to be made. Jonathan Taylor, Devon Achane. Like, do we want to put one of those guys in? Do we want to go up to like a Justin Jefferson? I would say no to Justin Jefferson in comparison to these two. So it's like, do we want to go one of these two and then a quarterback? we do have enough. If we go Jaden Daniels, we do have enough to get here. We can just put Jonathan Taylor in, actually. So we'll just move our defense down to here, and we will plug in Mr. Jonathan Taylor. All right, there you have it. First look lineup for the Week 7 NFL DFS slate: Jaden Daniels, Breece Hall, Quinshon Judkins, Rashee Rice, Luther Burden, Deebo Samuel, Michael Mayer, Jonathan Taylor, and the Tennessee Titans defense. If you made it to the end of the video, please hit that like button, subscribe to the Rolling Insights YouTube channel, and let me know in the comments what your favorite NFL DFS Week 7 play is. Thank you guys for tuning in, and I will see everybody on the live stream Sunday morning at 11 a.m.